Asunder by Ziltoid. In a world where Itachi truly wiped out every last Uchiha, Zetsu is at a loss for what to do. After all his schemes to resurrect Kaguya, he suddenly lost his most useful minions. Drastic measures were needed to acquire Uzumaki Naruto. Starts shortly after the Tsunade retrieval arc. So there's more adult scenes later in this story. Let me know if I should. I'm either gonna give a warning for them before they happen, and probably give like timestamps for people who prefer stories without them. Or if I should just not have them. Let me know what you think I should do with the more adult themed content in this fanfic. I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get right into it. Chapter 1: Resurrection. A parody of a human being, that is how one could describe the entity that rose from the ground, with its right half black and left half white, encased in what seemed like two Venus flytraps like leaves which emerged from its sides. This entity was called Zetsu, or rather, its white half was Shiro Zetsu, while the black half was Kuro Zetsu. The white half was a silly chatterbox, carefree and playful, blundering his way through life, while the black half was serious and knowledgeable. The two were distinctly different entities, yet somehow one at the same time. After all, the parasitic black half needed a host to survive on, and to carry on the will of his mother. The countless clones of the white half were well suited for his plans. The way you can just grow from the roots is interesting, a gravely voice welcomed him. You sure those white things don't have a heart? How rude, White Zetsu pouted. Shut up, fool. Black Zetsu silenced his other half. You were quiet. Through Kakuzu. You know that before you hired me, the S-rank missing nin from Takigakure shrugged. He was probably one of the few people who Zetsu knew who wasn't even fazed at the sight of his strange plant-like body. Then again, Kakuzu was rather peculiar himself as well. A battle had just ended, and the black threads which grew from Kakuzu's body due to Kinjutsu Joingu? What? I don't know, I'm not even gonna attempt that. Were still stitching his wounds. Seems like you had quite a fight. Of course he did. It was Satake Kakashi who opposed him. He was definitely someone who had earned the right to carry such a bounty, Kakuzu admitted, his voice virtually devoid of any emotion except a slight annoyance. Kakashi had after all taken out two of Kakuzu's hearts. Good things that he had affinity for Ray tone. He skewered my lightning hard, so having a way of replacing it right away is quite convenient. Now, all I need is a water heart. You don't happen to have an affinity for a Suiton? No, we told you we don't have a heart, nor organs. We can't even poop. Kakuzu lifted the corpse of a gray-haired shinobi from the ground. The joining from Konoha had put up quite the fight, but in the end Kakuzu had been the one who had the greater reserves. It had taken an annoyingly long time before the Hatake had finally run out of chakra though. The deaths of his cute little genin had sent him into a fury that had cost Kakuzu his first heart. The annoying Chidori had cost him a second. 50 million Ryo. 30 without his Sharingan. Kakuzu became uncharacteristically happy, or whatever passed for happiness for the miserly man, at the idea of the money he had just earned. Keep the eye, we don't need it. Still, not sure why we want the boy though. He's pivotal to our plans. The black-haired boy? Kakuzu wondered. His abilities with ink were quite unusual, but nothing special. The Yamanaka boy was stronger, but lacked any special ability. Naruto is no Yamanaka. The wider half of Zetsu giggled. Blonde, where's the clan symbol? And now that you mention it, he didn't use their techniques. Kakazu frowned slightly while putting on his cloak again. Why You killed the pink-haired girl instantly, but kept the boy alive like we asked. Good work. But only barely. His body is nearly severed in two. His wounds don't matter. We've regrown Toby after the Obito disaster, remember? Oh, so you're gonna use the new Toby just like the old one. It's still sad that he and the Uchiha died. Uchiha Itachi was an annoying impediment to our plans. The way you two keep arguing with yourselves is annoying. I'm gonna cash in on this corpse. Keep the money for yourself, Kakazu. Yeah, the other members of Akatsuki don't need to know about this. It's our little secret. It is. We have plans for the boy, and Pain doesn't need to know. Not to mention what Orochimaru would do. Ever since Itachi ended the Uchiha bloodline, he has shown a great interest in the bloodline of old. He might even find out a secret or two. But it will be futile in the end. We trust you, Kakazu, because you only trust in money and don't care about anything else. We can always locate new prey for you, as long as we can feed on the worthless casualties like the black hair and that pinky. Kakazu grumbled something under his breath, but the foul eating habits that the plant-like shinobi displayed, it wasn't that he really cared about what happened to the boy and the girl. They were unnecessary, not worth a single Rio, and Zetsu only wanted the blonde boy. Leaving his unsavory companions to do his dinner, Kakazu stalked off to the nearest bounty station. 50 million Rio was waiting to be collected after all. Zetsu truly had his uses. Bounty hunting had never gone so smoothly. A spiral patterned white man rose from the ground, eerily similar to the way Zetsu had traveled through the earth and roots. Of course, Toby was just another manifestation grown from the Ghetto Mazo, demonic statue of the outer path. Originally human, he had been a victim of the infinite Tsukiyomi, absorbed into the Shinju, God tree, just like White Zetsu, stored with the Ghetto Mazo. Toby had remained dormant and forgotten for centuries, trapped within the moon along with the statue. That is until Uchiha Madara awoke the Rinnegan and summoned the statue. He was the one who had freed Toby from his centuries of slumber, enabling him to grow a body from the wood-like tissue of the Ghetto Mazo. Well, Madara had foolishly believed that they had been grown from the tissue of Senju Hashirama, the Shodaime Hokage, but that had been a lie. In truth, Toby was compelled to be loyal to only one entity, captured and mutated to do her actions. Toby was loyal to the will which Otsutsuki Kaguya had left behind. Her son of sorts, Black Zetsu, was the one who secretly commanded all beings grown from the statue, but they lacked the power to resurrect Kaguya on their own, which led them to submitting themselves, even if it was under false pretense, to the will of someone far stronger. Madara had been the first human who had reached a level that approached the perfection of Kaguya. He was the first to strive for power to such a degree that he almost retraced it to its origin. He had even understood the necessity of Hashirama's chakra and tissue, which had led him to the Rinnegan, but it had been too late for the man, too old, too feeble. He had only prolonged his life by leeching off the Ghetto Mazo. He was pathetic, too pathetic for the plans of Black Zetsu, which was why they had manipulated Madara into giving the Rinnegan to a boy who had inherited the blood of the younger son, hoping that he would prove to be easier to manipulate. Unfortunately, that had proven a mistake. Much like Ashura himself, Nagato was too dulled by the notation of love. Even though loss eventually twisted his love into something darker, Nagato had turned out to be too difficult to control. As such, Zetsu had been happy when they had stumbled upon the nearly dead Uchiha boy. Taking him in, Toby had enveloped the boy, slowly turning him into something greater. They needed a champion. The death of Madara, now devoid of his Rinnegan, was merely a matter of time. The boy's Sharingan had already evolved into the Mangekyo Sharingan, granting him the useful ability of intangibility and what was effectively teleportation. All seemed to go according to plan until Itachi happened. Removing the Uchiha clan had mostly been a desire of Uchiha Obito, the boy that Zetsu had found, but it was also Zetsu's wish that Konoha was weakened. It was easier to operate without being detected during times of war after all. What had driven the boy to do it was something Zetsu had never discovered, but somewhere along the line, Itachi had snapped. Perhaps it was murdering his parents, perhaps it was the death of his girlfriend, or perhaps his little brother. Zetsu didn't know, didn't really care either. All that mattered was that Itachi had taken Obito out of the game. Whatever the sealing technique with that spectral blade had been, not even Obito was able to escape it. Obito, who even had managed to escape the Yondaime Hokage, was gone. Black Zetsu had spent centuries manipulating the Uchiha, and one boy had undone all those efforts. The bloodline had ended. The only remnants of the entire clan were the few eyes that remained. Zetsu knew that Orochimaru had a few of them, and Hatake Kakashi had also possessed one, but it wasn't enough. A few eyes weren't enough to recreate the bloodline. The eyes without the bodies were flawed. The death of Obito had almost meant the death of Toby, who had merged with the wounded body of the Uchiha. Regrowing Toby from the Ghetto Mazo had been a laborious task due to Zetsu's limited chakra reserves, but it had eventually been done. The new Toby entirely lacked any memories from the old one, but at least he had the same abilities. Toby, you're late. I sent a clone but couldn't find him right away. What's up? The fully white Toby exclaimed. If possible, this Toby was an even greater fool than the old one, a fact which Black Zetsu often reiterated to him. The spiral pattern that stretched all over his body gave Toby a completely different appearance from the planet-like Zetsu. The fact that Toby was literally hollow, perhaps explaining his lack of intelligence, was also unique. While Zetsu was akin to a fly trap that could consume flesh, Toby was created to encase a human and to sustain it. Quit fooling around. The boy is only barely alive. Even the odd chakra is running out. He's a Jinchuriki, you idiot. Oh, so that's why he's still alive? What other reason could there be? Kakuzu practically cut him in two. His legs are gone and his torso is damaged to a degree where no normal human would remain alive for more than a minute. We should thank our old friend, the QB. I thought you hated the QB. Oh, I thought the QB hated you. Toby tilted his head as a way to show his surprise. I was being sarcastic, airhead. Yeah, the QB always despised Mother. He was way too loyal to her son. He is one of Hagoromo's creations, and we were created by Mother. Should I, merge with him? What other reason could there be for me to call you here? Perhaps you missed me? Toby seemed to be too seriously considering the question, ignoring the deadpan expression on Zetsu. His inability to understand Black Zetsu's sarcasm was rather appealing. Or perhaps you found me dinner. I don't eat flesh like you do, but a nice... You're an idiot. That even you have the right to say it is rather telling of how dumb Toby is. Hey, why are you always picking on me? Because you're only slightly less of an idiot than Toby. Quit stalling, envelop the boy. Okie dokie, boss man. I don't want to ever do that again. Yes, Black Zetsu had nearly lost all hope. Without the Uchiha, his schemes seemed to turn into failure. Wandering aimlessly, he had witnessed the battle of two Jinchuriki. While he had only gone to Konoha to see how Orochimaru's little scheme to invade Konoha would turn out, it was hilarious to see how Orochimaru had lost his arms. Zetsu had found a strange boy, or rather a boy who made him literally feel strange, as if his genetic composition responded to the boy's chakra. Such overwhelming gang chakra. It was best alternative that Zetsu had. Toby swallowed the body of the near-dead Jinchuriki, Uzumaki Naruto. Zetsu recalled and been the boy's name. Why he lived within the confines of another clan was something he hadn't figured out, nor why he wore the Yamanaka symbol. Uzumakis usually had red hair, while Naruto was blonde. Perhaps he was part Yamanaka, or perhaps he lived among the Yamanaka in order for the boy to remain unnoticed. His spiky hair was quite unlike the smooth-haired Yamanaka, but at least the color was right. Toby opened up, encasing the boy. His white tissue immediately began to grow and contort, stopping the boy from bleeding dry. Like ivy growing into a stone wall, Toby's plant-like tissue invaded Naruto's flesh. Zetsu had seen it before, although in a different matter. Obito had struggled to control the tissue which Zetsu had given him, after the boy had lost half his body, being crushed underneath the immeasurable weight of the stone. Where Obito had seemed to struggle, almost rejecting the tissue, Naruto seemed to greedily absorb it. So much yang energy. Toby's flesh is responding immediately. Is this why the boy is so interesting? Just wait and see. Toby will soon lose the struggle. Lose? What do you mean? You feel the same sensation from the boy's chakra, right? Imagine how Toby must feel. So much vitality. Poor Toby. Black Zetsu couldn't find any pity for Toby. He had been bred for this task. While Zetsu was able to create as many clones as his chakra tolerated and had many techniques that specialized in espionage, Toby was different. Toby could not create clones. Instead, Toby had resonated most of all with Hashirama's tissue. It had been an extremely bad day for Kurama, one almost equaling the day he had been split in half to be sealed within the son of the woman he had been sealed in previously. That very child was on the border of life and death, and Kurama had to exert himself to keep the boy alive. The death of the boy would, after all, imply that he died as well, and the Kyuubi had no desire for death, not the least because he did not know what would happen if he died. It was not the Biju could actually die, not by the mortal sense of the world. His body could be destroyed, yes, which was as close to death as the Kyuubi could get. What was more worrisome was that he had lost his yin half when he was sealed within Naruto. While only having yang energy, Kurama doubted that he could recreate his body. Yang could breathe life into form, but yin was needed to create form. Stupid brat, the enormous fox howled. The light within his prison was slowly dimming, at the same rate as the vigor was slipping out of the boy, and then suddenly everything changed. Plants' roots from mighty trees grew through the sewer that led towards Kurama's prison. The walls were also slowly being covered. The ground, normally covered with water, dried up as the foliage soaked it up. A foreign chakra invaded Naruto's body, merging with it, and the remnants of Naruto's chakra responded. Not that he could be blamed for not trying to stop it. Whatever happened to the boy, it was bad news. The man who had attacked them, who had killed the teacher and the Konoichi and left Naruto for dead, had obviously acted on orders of something else. Kurama cursed the fact that Naruto's sight had failed when he completely lost consciousness. A blur of black and white was the last thing Kurama had seen through Naruto's nearly closed eyes. It was bad news indeed. Whatever it was, if the boy was completely taken over, then Kurama would be at their mercy, which was utterly unacceptable. So when the foreign chakra reached out for the boy's unconscious form, which had been resting right in front of Kurama's prison, the mighty nine-tailed fox lashed out with his claws. The pull of the foreign chakra increased, but Kurama didn't relent. The boy might be an insufferable miscreant, but at least he left Kurama alone, and whoever it was that tried to take over the boy's body would undoubtedly be worse. The opposing powers struggled for dominance, with Kurama severely handicapped due to the restrictions with the shield imposed on him. Regardless, Kurama was mighty enough to match the power of the foreign chakra. It had the same odd quality which reminded Kurama of Senju Hashirama and his Mokuton, but this form of the wood relief was incomparably weaker. Naruto's ego was left dangling between the two powers, unable to endure it ripped asunder. In a moment of desperation, Kurama forced all his chakra through the seal. The mighty the might of the fox had been cut in half by Namikaze Minato, but ironically it was only the yang energy that Kurama needed right now. The foreign chakra couldn't handle it and transformed. The result was a genetic rewrite which Kurama couldn't stop. The boy and the invader became one, except for the part of the boy which Kurama still held in his claws, with the ego of the boy torn asunder. Kurama knew he had to act quickly. That shattered part of the boy's entity was perfect to close off the seal. Whatever the other half of the boy had become, it would not be able to reach Kurama. Not without Kurama's permission, at least. Zetsu, both halves, continued watching how Toby merged with the boy. Does this kill Toby? The boy is nearly dead. Toby should be the dominant personality. The boy's yang chakra will only help him gain more power. Toby's Mokuton would be drastically improved. Why is Mokuton so important? Black Zetsu sighed, annoyed by the ignorance of his wider half. Mother's remains, the statue, are composed of wood, so if we can't have a proper Uchiha to control the statue until Mother returns, what would be better than someone with the Mokuton Kekkei Genkai? Oh, so Toby's gonna turn into Super Toby. But why? We've got Nagato for that, right? Josetsu, you're a moron. Black Zetsu reminded him of his nickname, Chatterbox. Pointless chatter was what seemed to define White Zetsu. He'd rather talk than think, unlike his blacker half. Nagato doesn't trust us, and I don't trust him. Nagato dreams of peace, and why would we tell him about our real goals? All we need is a vessel to control the Jubi until we can resurrect the Shinju, and once that happens, Mom will be happy to be back. Hush. Toby's waking up. His chakra just now, it was huge. Yes, it definitely was. Will it be the same old Toby? It should be. Our loyal yet strong puppet. Blue eyes fluttered, the swirling mask of Toby leaving the boy's head free. Toby! How do you feel? Who? The boy muttered after a pause, seemingly surprised by the question. Toby's flesh kept shrinking, merging with Naruto's body to a greater degree than Zetsu. Both Black and White had anticipated. This was nothing like what they had seen with Obito. Stop kidding around, Toby, Black Zetsu growled. Pain. The entire body was permeating with a pain that blinded him, that replaced his every thought. Something from outside penetrated his flesh, changing him. Something from within answered, burning and churning, also changing him. He jumbled in between, forgetting who or what he was. A power that was initially his emerged, somehow soothing his pain, comforting him. It replaced the outside force and subdued the fire from within him. It ended the struggle, yet at what cost? A gasp escaped his lips, suddenly aware of the necessity of oxygen. The entire world swirled and shifted, opening up in a way that was foreign to him, and yet... I see without eyes. I see the roots of the trees. I see the leaves. I see the vines. I sense everything, and yet I am blind. Toby? A voice spoke to him. It sounded rather flippant, as if they knew each other. How do you feel? A second, rougher voice followed after the other, seamlessly. The first was friendly enough, but the other scared him. He somehow felt like he had to listen to it, but when he considered why, he decided to dismiss the feeling. Who? He muttered. Was he Toby? No, he didn't feel like the name was familiar. The name felt completely foreign, but he couldn't recall who he really was. A vexing thought encroached upon him, the idea that he was. It was so close. He was about to say it, but the knowledge just kept slipping away. The moment he thought that he remembered it, he forgot again. Stop fooling around, Toby. The ill-tempered voice again. The boy tried to move, but that was about as impossible as remembering. The smell of freshly served ramen made him drool. The warmth of the blood comforted him, but that was just about everything he knew. There were vague impressions, including of his legs, which currently felt wrong. He didn't know why his legs were wrong, but he just knew. Not knowing why only led him to be more frustrated. Or was it that the sense of anger and loss that suddenly boiled up for no reason? Again, he tried to move. Whether he was Toby or not, he didn't know. But he did want to get up and see what was going on. His legs felt soft like warm butter. His stomach felt odd as well, as if every organ was still rearranging itself. It didn't feel painful, it just felt, well, the only impression he knew that could be compared to it was an itch. He tried to lift his arms, and instead his messed up senses extended to something outside his body. Why is he manipulating that tree? The friendlier voice asked in surprise. He'll need time to adjust, the other growled. The strange thing, now that he considered it, was that there was two voices, while he only sensed one body. Realizing that he could sense the other, he turned his attention to himself. His body was different from how he remembered it. Somehow, the vague impressions that he had from the time before waking up had told him that something had changed. Who am I? He questioned aloud. He seems to have forgotten. Yes, he remembers nothing. Pitiful. Should we bring him home? He will be needing time to adjust to the changes. Is he Toby or Naruto? Naruto? The nameless boy liked the sound of the name better than Toby. Toby. Liked the name better than Toby. Naruto gave him impressions of mischief, orange, and something else. The frustration grew, and with it his chakra spiked. Flowers sprouted from their bulbs, bloomed and perished. Trees shed their leaves and grew new ones. Acorns erupted into small trees. In a matter of seconds, the boy chakra overflowed the nearby nature. The worst aspect was that Zetsu had to struggle not to lose his own cohesion, as if he too was erupting into a tree, while Zetsu was especially suffering. We're lucky he passed out, Black Zetsu mumbled, looking down at the exhausted boy. Mokutan. When I witnessed him engage the Ichibi, I knew he could have the potential with the overwhelming gang energy he has. When he used the Kyuubi chakra, it was as if he was overflowing with life. Yet I never anticipated him to change so fundamentally. So even you don't know everything. Only Mother does. Senju Tsunade regretted the day she had allowed that little blonde brat to convince her to go back home. Paperwork was bad, politics were worse, but the absolute worst was when she had sent people on missions and they didn't return. It was over a week, and still no one had heard a thing of Hatake Kakashi and his team. Even Danzo had sworn ignorance of where they were, despite admitting that Sai, one of the genin of Team 7, was one of his operatives. Keeping an eye on the Jinchuriki of Konoha was something that stood high on the man's agenda. Losing the young Uzumaki would be a harsh blow for the village. But Tsunade couldn't care all that much about the village right now. Every day that had passed had increased the sense of dread that filled her heart. I made a mistake. I should have never given him that dang necklace. It is a curse. Hurry back home, brat. But Naruto never listened. Sure, he was the second most flippant subordinate that Tsunade had, only surpassed by the boy's godfather. But she cared too much about the boy to ever punish him for his lack of respect. No other shinobi would leave her office without at least a broken bone or two if he called her grandmother. But he could. Perhaps it was because he resembled Nawaki so much. Nawaki. The mere thought of her younger brother made her afraid. Day after day passed, but no message from Karachi came. No smiling blonde brat barged into her office unannounced. No disruption arose within the village due to one of his successful pranks. It gave her a fearful premonition. In a way, Tsunade was thankful that there was still so much for her to do. The invasion of combined forces of Otagakure and Sunagakure had left deep scars in Konoha, and as the Hokage, she was the one who had to undo much of the damage that her former teammates has caused. But even thinking about the invasion often made her thoughts wander off to Naruto, as he had been the one who stopped Suna's Jinchuriki. Sabaku Nogara had returned to Suna, and had truly had a change of heart, to the degree that he had practically scared the elders of his village into surrendering. It ended the foolish conflict that had been started only due to Orochimaru's schemes. Reparations, concessions, and renegotiating the peace treaty were things that would never have gone as smoothly as they did without Gaara's influence. Tsunade hoped that the boy, who was likely the strongest shinobi of Sunagakure, would end up being the next Kazekage. At least he had good intentions towards Konoha. Yes, and when I resign and hand my position to Naruto, he would have the perfect ally in Gaara. Naruto. Tsunade wondered how he had wiggled his way to her heart so easily. She, who had distanced herself from practically everyone except Shizune and the pet piglet Tauntaun, had never thought that she would be swayed so easily, especially not after Dawn, her lover, had perished. She had seen life slip through her hands just like she had been powerless to do anything to avert Nawaki's death, the most famous healer in the world. Bah, I've done nothing but fail the people I cared most about. It makes me wonder what kind of idiot ever thought that I was fit for this position. Naruto had. Tired and frustrated, Tsunade looked the usual way out. Perhaps she would find some solace in the bottle of sake, or one of the others. Somewhere along the line, she had been so drunk that she had fallen asleep, head down on the desk, drooling over all kinds of important documents. Her head felt like it was splitting. The hangover had already set in, and when she saw the cautious first rays of the morning sun, Tsunade wondered why she had woken up. Sleeping was much better. So she tried to close her eyes again, doing her best to ignore her headache and her churning stomach. Tsunade. Something in his voice made her thoughts of sleep vanish. She shivered and sprouted open her eyes. Jiraiya? He didn't answer immediately, but something in his eyes, before he had quickly averted his eyes, had filled her with fear. He wasn't looking away because he was dressed indecently, which she was. Considering how her blouse had sagged open a little during her little dive into the sake reserves. But there was something else. Her intoxicated brain had some trouble recognizing that voice of his, that expression she had seen before. When he told her. No, she whispered. No, don't tell me he is. He gently laid a necklace on her desk, the crystal gem still partially covered in dried up a clot of blood and mud. His voice broke, and she could hear the tears he had shed. It's all I found of him. It can't, not him, not that brat. He swore to me. He swore he'd never, not before he would become Hokage, she whimpered. Someone cashed in the bounty of Hatake Kakashi, Jiraiya whispered, and laid down a scroll in which the man's body rested. Jiraiya didn't want to tell how many throats he had cut to get his hands on the body, nor was Tsunade willing to ask. In fact, she wished he hadn't told her. She didn't want him to say it, that Naruto died. She almost hated him for bringing the news. I retraced where it happened. He puts down 2 more scrolls. I found the remains of Sakura and Sai, and blood. Some parts of so much blood. The toads. His name vanished from the contract. She had no idea when she left her chair, but suddenly she realized he had grabbed Jiraiya by the hem of his shirt, lifting the tall man from the ground with just a single hand. You're lying. She could hear the desperation in her own voice, making her wonder why she acted like this. It was the risk of their profession. It was what happened to all who wore that accursed necklace. It's not true. I ordered him not to. I won't. She broke down in tears, only held up by Jiraiya's gentle embrace. Vaguely she heard as the man lost his his restraint as well. She knew how he had cared about Minato, how it had devastated him that Minato had died, and now the man's son, his own godson, had perished. He was even closer to the boy than she ever was, and yet here she was, the mighty Hokage, who was bawling her eyes out, only remaining on her feet because of a man who was hurting even more than her had the strength to keep her up. It's not fair, she repeated several times. It can't be Naruto. But no matter how she wished that Jiraiya told her that it wasn't true, he remained in silence. The boy woke up again. His body had been broken and restored, but his new tissue had not been his own, at least not originally. What once had been the frivolous entity known as Toby was not completely merged with Naruto. However, the current Naruto was not much like the Naruto Uzumaki had been before his presumed death. The current Naruto could not remember that Naruto. No, all that his Naruto knew were basic things. He had some skills, but lacked the memories of how he got them. He knew the words, but had forgotten the people who had taught them to him. It was an infuriating situation, only worsened by his lack of mobility. He had to learn how to control his legs, how to move his arms, how to flex any muscle in his body. It made him wonder how much of his body had been destroyed, but when he asked, Zetsu had only vaguely answered. Considering the color of his skin, Naruto assumed he lost both his legs and at least one of his arms. Much of his torso was not made out of the white goo as well. What once was Toby was now his tissue, but it was remarkably hard to control. Other things complicated Naruto's situation even more. Zetsu had been forced to move Naruto to an underground cave, too cold to be filled with vegetation. The problem was that Naruto somehow could not make the distinction between his body and everything around him. When he tried to move a finger, a nearby tree would randomly move its branches, or if he tried to stand up, vines erupted from the ground. It was too confusing for the boy, which had forced Zetsu to move him to a place where there was less greenery. Surrounded by solid rock, Naruto finally made progress, moving instinctively, solidifying the parts of his body which had once been Toby. Every little step of progress was only accomplished through hard work. The second step of his progress was gaining control of his newfound Kekkei. Through Toby, who had inherited the ability either from the Geromazo or through the clone tissue of Senju Hashirama, Naruto was genetically altered to the degree that he could influence all plants. Influence was the right word at this point because Naruto still had a long way to go before he could be able to claim that he could control anything. Seems like you're getting faster. He's still too slow. It's rude to ignore us. Let him. He should be focusing on his training. But shouldn't he be looking forward to the news we have? What news? Naruto sighed. He knew that Zetsu wouldn't stop annoying him until he told Naruto what he wanted. Zetsu was the only person, if he could be considered as such, who visited Naruto in this lone cave, and yet for some reason Naruto mostly felt annoyed by the plant-like shinobi. We found you a teacher. One who had first-hand experience on dealing with your Kekkei. Yes, because we don't know how to use it properly. We lack the necessary vitality and chakra. Black Zetsu finished. Besides, you need to learn how to do more than just Smoketon. Other skills are useful too, like Suiton or Doton. But fire and wind too. Not too big of a fan of lightning though. It tends to give me a splitting headache. Stop whining, it was just a clone that died. But he didn't have to be so uptight. It is your fault for pointing him out to that bounty. Or his own fault for not being quick enough. How could we know that someone else was after that idiot as well? You're giving me a headache, Naruto grumbled. As usual, I'd add, who is this teacher? And does it mean that I can get out of here? Being restricted to this little valley after you finally let me out of the cave is starting to bore me. Kakuzu should be here soon. White Zetsu gave the boy a thumbs up. He's not a patient man, so make sure to watch your step. Or you'll exit this life. Stupid piece of mutated lettuce, Naruto growled after the Zetsu duo sank into the ground. Ever since his release from that empty cave where he had been fully reliant on Zetsu for food and water, Naruto had seen the moon grow full twice. Still, he lived in an awkward shed, an amalgamation of several trees, which as a testament to his shoddy control almost looked like it had randomly formed a shelter. Zetsu came and went according to his own wishes, seemingly taking pleasure in Naruto's growing frustration. Not that the boy could move around, the torment of not knowing had only grown worse. That which had once been Toby had merged with the boy, acting as a catalyst for the boy's yang chakra to affect the nature surrounding him, while the QB had somehow closed off the seal. With only a bare minimum of chakra leaking out, Naruto spent his first 13 years while basking in the creature's chakra. Luckily, Zetsu believed that it was Naruto's Mokuton that was suppressing the QB, or he might have grown suspicious. Black Zetsu at least. His wider half was too stupid to ever notice it. With Zetsu gone, all that was left for Naruto was patience. Days were wasted in waiting, until Naruto felt someone enter his forest. In this vicinity, Naruto felt everything through the roots and barks of the very trees surrounding him. Then again, the one who entered the forest of this hidden valley had simply too much chakra to not notice. Much to his frustration, Naruto once again felt something gnawing at his memories. Something about this situation was familiar, but what? Perhaps I've met this Kakazu before, Naruto sighed. Oh well, he can't be worse than that crappy piece of lettuce, can he? But why does his chakra make me feel such anger? Okay guys, that will be it for this episode. Remember, Naruto is still a child. This is like right after the war, after they got Tsunade to come back. Team 7 went on a mission. Everyone else in Team 7 exited life, and Naruto's the only one left. So this is what, 12-year-old Naruto? I'm not sure how old he was, but young Naruto, child, right? I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, smash that like button for another part, comment Q, or anime physics, and subscribe if you haven't already. If this was well, the next part should be coming out tomorrow. If not, maybe in a few days. Have a great day. I appreciate you watching, and bye.